I'm a lifelong hunter. There's something in the woods that my cameras can't see, but they can definitely hear it. I've spent more of my life in the woods than out of them. It's part of who I am, if I can say that. The smell of damp earth and pine needles after a rain, the snap of a twig that tells you something's moving nearby, the way the light filters through the canopy of dawn. It's a language. I've been learning it since I was a kid. I hunt, but not for sport. It's about respect, understanding the ecosystem, and providing for myself in the most honest way I know how. This year, I was scouting a new section of state land, a thick stretch of old growth forest that rolls over a series of granite faced hills. It's the kind of place that feels ancient, where the sounds are so deep that you feel its sharpness in your ears. I was looking for signs of a decent buck I'd seen tracks for, a real monster by the size of him. To get a better idea of his patterns, I decided to set up one of my trail cameras. If you don't know, these things are pretty simple. They're rugged little cameras in a camo box that you strap to a tree. A motion sensor triggers them to record a short video clip, day or night. It's an invaluable tool. You learn what's moving through an area and when. So I found a promising game trail, a natural funnel between two rock outcroppings, and strapped my camera to a big oak, aiming it down the path. I checked the angle to make sure the view was clear and left it to do its work. A week later, I hiked back in. The air was cool and crisp, a perfect autumn afternoon. I felt that familiar sense of quiet anticipation as I unstrapped the camera. Back in my truck, I popped the SD card into my laptop, eager to see what it had been wandering by. The first dozen clips were exactly what you'd expect. A family of raccoons, their eyes glowing like little demons in the infrared night vision, bickering over something on the ground. A lone fox, delicate and sharp, trotting past with a purposeful air, squirrel doing something spatic and indecipherable directly in front of the lens. Then a few does that came through in the early morning, picking their way cautiously, their ears constantly swiveling. Standard stuff. I was clicking through the files, half watching when I got to the last one. The file name was different. Instead of the usual image underscore 0047.mp4, it was something like video underscore corrupted underscore 0047.mp4. My first thought was just a quiet curse. SD cards can be finicky. Sometimes they just glitched. I figured it was a dead file, probably unplayable and a waste of battery life. Still, I clicked on it. To my surprise, it opened. The video was 3 seconds long. It showed one of the does from the earlier clips. She had been grazing just off the trail, but in the first second of the video, her head snapped up. Her whole body went rigid. Her ears, which had been lolling lazily, were now pricked forward, laser focused on something just past the camera to the left. Her eyes were wide, white ringing the dark pupils. It was the posture of an animal that had just sensed immediate mortal danger. Then at the 3 second mark, the image froze, just locked on that terrified deer in the perfect high-resolution still frame. But the audio didn't stop. The remaining 27 seconds of the clip, as the image of the petrified doe stayed on my screen, a sound played. It's hard to describe. It wasn't a growl or a scream or an animal call I've ever heard in my life. It was melodic. It was a high, ethereal, warbling sound, almost like a woman singing in a single, sustained, sorrowful note. It passed through a filter of static and wind. It rose and fell and pitched slightly, like a lonely, distorted theremin playing in the deep woods. It was beautiful in a way if you know dirge is beautiful. It was deeply, profoundly unsettling. The sound was clean, clear as a bell, recorded with perfect fidelity, while the video feed was completely bricked. The clip ended. The screen went black. I just sat there in the driver's seat of my truck, the sounds of the forest outside suddenly feeling very different. My rational brain kicked in first. It was a technical malfunction. The sound was just feedback, some kind of weird audio artifact caused by the same air that froze the video. It had to be. Still, I couldn't shake the image of that deer. The absolute primal terror in its posture. Animals don't react like that to a camera glitch. I decided to move the camera. I told myself it was because the spot was a bust, but I knew I was lying. I wanted to see if it would happen again. I drove to the other side of the state land, a good 5 miles from the first spot, to an area I knew well. It was a small creek bottom, surrounded by thickets of mountain laurel. I found another good trail, this one muddy and littered with fresh tracks, and set up the camera on a sycamore overlooking the creek crossing. I gave it another week. My mind returned to that sound at odd moments, while I was trying to fall asleep, while I was sitting in the line at the grocery store, that strange singing lament. I tried to find examples of it online, searching for things like weird audio feedback trail cameras, strange electronic noise in woods. Nothing came close. The following weekend, I went back for the second camera. I felt a knot in my stomach the whole hike in. It was a feeling I wasn't used to in the woods. I wasn't an observer anymore. I felt like I was being poking something I didn't understand. Back in the truck, I went through the same ritual. This time, I skipped right to the end of the file list. There it was, vid underscore corrupt underscore 0081 dot mp4. My breath caught in my chest. I clicked play. This time, the subject was a big male coyote, slinking along the creek bank under the pale wash of the moonlight. He was a healthy looking animal, confident in his domain. For 2 seconds, he was just a coyote. In the third second, he stopped dead, his head whipped around, snout pointed directly at the space just to the right of the camera. The fur on his back bristled. He let a low, guttural growl, and then the image froze. And the sound started. The exact same sound, the same pitch, the same sorrowful melodic warble, the same static laced, ethereal singing. It echoed through my truck speakers, a sound that had no business belonging in the woods, a sound of pure strangeness. It played for the full 27 seconds over the frozen image of the snarling, terrified coyote. I closed the laptop. My hands were shaking. This wasn't a camera malfunction. A glitch doesn't replicate itself perfectly on a different date in a different location with a different file number. This was a pattern. I started to formulate a theory. The corruption wasn't a glitch in the recording. The corruption was the recording. It was the event itself. I thought about the camera sensor. It's designed to capture light and movement within a certain spectrum, a certain speed. What if something wasn't moving in a way the camera's processor just couldn't handle? What if it was too fast, or emitted some kind of energy, or moved in a way that defied the simple logic of the machine? The camera would try to write the data, fail, and the video would just freeze at the last coherent frame it could manage. But the microphone is a simpler device. It just measures vibrations in the air. It doesn't care what's making them, it just records. The animals weren't scared of a camera glitch. They were scared of whatever was causing it. They could see it or sense it. In that single second before my camera gave up the ghost, or whatever this thing was, it would appear. The animal would react and the camera would fail, leaving only that haunting, impossible sound as evidence of its passage. The hunter in me was gone. The part of me that respected the woods, that understood its rhythms, was screaming that this was a rhythm I should leave alone. But the curiosity, the sheer gnawing need to know, was stronger. This was a puzzle happening in my woods, and I couldn't let it go. It felt like I was the only person in the world who knew this was happening. I needed more data. I needed more angles. I spent more money than I should have. I bought 3 more cameras, all the same model as my first one. My plan was simple, if a bit crazy. I was going to triangulate the event. I found a small, deep clearing deep in the forest, roughly equidistant from the first 2 locations. It was a quiet, bowl-shaped depression, maybe 50 yards across, ringed by tall, dark pines, the kind of place that felt hushed and watchful even in the middle of the day. I spent an entire afternoon setting it up. I mounted the 3 new cameras plus my original one on 4 separate trees at the points of the compass, all aimed directly at the center of the clearing. I was meticulous, and I used a handheld GPS to make sure they were perfectly spaced. I synced their internal clocks down to the second. My thinking was, if the event happened in the center of the clearing, it would be the field of view, all cameras at once. Maybe 1 or 2 would glitch, but surely one of them, from a different angle, a different perspective, would capture a clean image of what this thing was. As I finished with the last camera and stood in the center of the clearing, a cold breeze swept down through the trees. The sun was getting low, casting long, distorted shadows that stretched like grasping fingers across the forest floor. For the first time in my life, I felt an urgent need to get out of the woods before dark. I packed my gear and practically jogged back to my truck, the feeling of being watched boring into my back the entire way. That was the longest week of my life. I barely slept. Every time I closed my eyes, I could hear the melodic wail. I wasn't thinking about deer anymore. I was obsessed. I thought about all the stories you hear from the deep woods, the tales of people who go missing, the strange lights, the sounds that can't be explained. I'd always dismissed them as campfire stories, the product of an overreactive imagination in a lonely place. Now I wasn't so sure. Finally, the day came. I drove up to the spot, my stomach churning. The clearing felt the same as it felt when I left it, quiet, still, expectant. I went from tree to tree, my hands fumbling with the straps as I collected the 4 cameras. I didn't even wait to get back to the truck. I sat on a fallen log at the edge of the clearing, pulling out my laptop, and began the process. I loaded the card from the north-facing camera first. I scrolled through the files, hours of footage of an empty clearing, wind shaking the branches, a squirrel, a blue jay, then my heart hammered against my ribs. Video underscore corrupt underscore 0112.mp4, timestamped at 2:17:44 a.m. My hands were trembling so bad I could barely control the mouse. I pulled the second card, the one from the east facing camera. I didn't even look at the other files. I just scrolled to the timestamp, 2:17:44 a.m. Another corrupted file. Southern camera, corrupted file, 2:17:44 a.m. West camera, corrupted file, 2:17:44 a.m. They all glitched at the exact same time. A wave of cold, heavy disappointment washed over me, quickly followed by a fresh surge of dread. My plan had failed. It hadn't been a matter of angles. Whatever this thing was, its presence was enough to overwhelm all of them simultaneously. Defeated, I decided to watch them anyway. I opened the file from the north camera. A small rabbit was in frame, nibbling on some clover in the center of the clearing. For 2 seconds it was peaceful. Then its head shot up. Its nose twitched frantically, and it bolted out of frame in a brown blur. The image froze on the empty clearing a split second later. Then the singing started. I opened the other three files. The footage was almost identical. Each one captured the same rabbit from a different angle. Each one showed its moment of sheer panic, and each one froze at the exact same instant, leaving an image of an empty patch of grass and trees. And from the speakers of my laptop, the sound played, quadrupled now, overlapping from the four open video players. The air around me filled with that horrible, beautiful singing scream. It was a chorus from hell. I slammed the laptop shut, my ears ringing with the phantom melody. I sat there for a long time, the sounds of the woods pressed in. My experiment was a failure. I had nothing, just four videos of nothing. But wait, the final frame, the frozen image. It was an image of an empty clearing, but it was an image captured at the exact instant the event occurred. Maybe there was something there, a clue. I opened the laptop again, my heart pounding. I pulled the four frozen frames up on my screen, side by side, north, south, east, and west. Four identical pictures of an empty clearing. Taking at the same fraction of a second, I zoomed in, scanned every pixel. Nothing. Just grass, a few fallen leaves, and distant trees. I was about to give up when my eyes caught something. It was subtle, so subtle I thought I was imagining it. It wasn't in the clearing itself, it was the shadows. The moon must have been almost directly overhead at 2:17 a.m. because the shadows cast by the trees ringing the clearing were short, falling almost directly at their end bases. But in these frozen frames, they were wrong. The shadows of the trees on the northern edge of the clearing weren't falling south, they were bent and stretched. They pointed inward towards the empty spot in the center of the clearing, and the shadows from the trees on the eastern edge were doing the same, elongated and distorted, pointing west toward the center. All of them, every shadow in the frame, from the tallest pine to the smallest sapling, was subtly warped, pulling from its natural position as if by an admission, invisible gravitational force, all pointing like silent, accusing fingers at a single empty patch of ground right in the middle of this frame. I was looking at a photograph of the absence of something, an outline, drawn in shadow, of a thing that the cameras could not see. I had to go look. I couldn't leave it alone. The sun was high and bright now. The woods felt normal again. The fear from the night before seemed distant, irrational. I walked to the center of the clearing, to the spot where all the impossible shadows had converged. It was nothing, just a patch of grass like any other. I kicked at the dirt. I knelt, running my fingers through the blades of grass and over the deep earth. Nothing. I felt an urge of frustration. Was I going crazy? Was I seeing patterns and static? I was about to stand up when a glint of light caught my eye. Not a natural glint like dew on a leaf, but the hard, sharp flash of reflective metal on part of the grass. Then, half buried in the dark soil, was a ring. It was a simple silver band, a woman's wedding ring, tarnished with dirt and age. My blood ran cold. This was real. I stood up and looked around the clearing. The silent watching trees. Someone had been here. My mind raced. The singing, the sorrowful wailing sound, the terror of the animals, the ring, a dark, terrible idea began to form in my head, an idea that made my throat tighten. I didn't even think about it. I went back to my truck, my mind on autopilot. I grabbed the small intervention tool I kept for emergencies. I walked back to the clearing, my boots heavy on the Force floor. I stood over the spot where I found the ring and I started to dig. The work was hard, the soil was dense and wet with roots. I sweated and strained. Shovelful after shovelful of dark earth piled up beside the hole. I was driven by a grim, compulsive need to see what was down there, to prove my horrifying suspicion, right or wrong. The sun bent down, but I barely noticed. I just dug. After about 2 feet, my shovel hit something that wasn't a rock or a root. It made a dull, soft, sinking thud, and a smell, a thick, coppery, rotten, sweet smell, rose from the hole. The smell of decay. I dropped the shovel and fell to my knees, scraping at the loose dirt with my bare hands. First, I uncovered what looked like a scrap of faded blue fabric. Then my fingers brushed against something hard and curved, a bone. I kept digging, my breath coming in ragged gasps, until I had uncovered it enough to see. It was a body, what was left of one. It was in a terrible state, mostly skeletal, wrapped in a tattered remains of what looked like hiking clothes. A woman. I thought, judging by the frame and the scraps of clothing, lying in a shallow, unmarked grave, right in the spot where the shadow bent. I scrambled back from the hole, gagging, my mind reading. I had found her, the source of the song, the reason for the fear. I stared at the shallow grave, the silent remains, and a profound sadness washed over me. A person, a life, ended here, alone in the deep woods. It was in the moment of horrified stillness that I noticed it. The quality of the light had changed. The bright, reassuring sunlight had faded to a deep, bruising orange. The shadows, the real shadows this time, were growing long and black around me. I looked up at the sky. The sun was gone, sunk below the tree line. I had been digging for hours. I had been so consumed by my task I had let the day slip away. Night was falling. A jolt of pure adrenaline shot through me, a primal instinctual terror that eclipsed everything else. It happened at night. The thought screamed through my head, and I was here in the clearing at the center, at our grave. I didn't even think to fill the hole back in. I just grabbed my shovel, my pack, and my laptop, and I ran. I crashed through the undergrowth, branches whipping in my face, my only thought to get out, to get away from that place, and then I heard it. It was coming from the woods behind me, all around me. The same high melodic wailing sound from the videos. It was louder now, raw, filled with a grief and rage that was terrifying real. It was here with me. I ran faster, my lungs burning, my legs pumping. The sound grew in intensity, a piercing singing scream that seemed to vibrate in my bones. I could see the faint distant glow of the streetlights on the road through the trees. It was maybe 100 yards away. The singing was right behind me now. It was so loud it felt like it was inside my head. I risked a glance over my shoulder and I saw nothing but impenetrable blackness, but I could feel it, a presence, a cold spot in the air that was moving as fast as I was. I pushed myself harder, my body screaming in protest. The road was so close, the edge of the woods, the line between the wild and the sane world, was just feet away. Then I felt it. A pressure on my left shoulder. It was a weight, a point of intense, still deep cold that seemed to leech the strength from my limbs. It wasn't grabbing me, not yet. It was just there. I let out a yell and threw my entire body forward, a desperate, clumsy lunge. I stumbled out of the tree line, crashing through the last line of bushes, and fell into the hard, unforgiving asphalt of the road's shoulder. The instant my boots hit the pavement, the sound stopped. Not faded away, it just cut out. One moment the air was filled with that unholy, screaming melody. The next, there was only the sound of my own ragged breathing and the chirping of crickets, complete, total silence from the woods I had just escaped. I laid on the ground for a long time, grasping for air, standing back at the black, silent wall of trees. Nothing. There was nothing there, but it was there. I know it was. I felt it. I eventually found my car and drove straight to the county sheriff's office and told them everything. I probably sounded like a lunatic, rambling about corrupted videos and singing sounds and bent shadows. But when I told them about the body, they listened. I led them back there the next morning. The grave was just as I left it. They'd cornered out the area and did their work. I gave my full statement, let out the parts about the singing in the shadows. I just said I was scouting, saw a depression on the ground, and I got a bad feeling. That was a week ago. The reason I'm writing all this down, the reason you're reading it, is because I got a phone call about an hour ago. It was from one of the detectives on the case. They had identified the remains. She was a hiker who had been reported missing last year. Her car had been found at a trailhead on the other side of the state land. They searched for months and found nothing. He thanked me for my help and told me the family had been notified. He said they were just glad to have closure. Closure? I hope he's right. I hope she can rest now, and I hope finding her has brought some kind of peace.